The Lord be with you. The reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Before the feast of Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to pass from this world to the Father. He loved his own and he loved them to the end. The devil had already accused Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to hand him over. So, during supper, fully aware that the Father had put everything into his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God, he rose at supper and took off his outer garment. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dried them with the towel around his waist. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Master, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus answered and said to him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but you will understand later. Peter said to him, you will never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, unless I wash you, you will have no inheritance with me. Simon Peter said to him, Master, then not only my feet, but my hands and head as well. Jesus said to him, whoever has bathed has no need except to have his feet washed, for he is clean all over. But you are clean, but not all. For he knew who would betray him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. So when he had washed their feet and put his garments back on and reclined at table again, he said to them, do you realize what I have done for you? You call me teacher and master, and rightly so. For indeed I am, if I give the master and teacher have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you should also do. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
One day last week, I got an email inquiry from a woman who wanted to know if I could help her out with some genealogical research. She said that her father and his siblings had been born here in Wareham. She thought the family went back at least as far as 1880. She wanted to know what information I might be able to give her about their sacramental records. She said that she remembered coming here to St. Patrick's as a young girl in the summers. She said that Monsignor Callahan was the pastor then. Monsignor Callahan was the pastor who built this church, the new, if you will, St. Patrick's Church. That would have placed her as a child in the 1940s. She told me that she had very fond memories of her time here in Wareham. The surname that she spoke of rang a little bell with me. I went in to check a little poster we have on the wall in one of our rooms in the rectory. It's a list of all the people who contributed to the purchase of the original St. Patrick's Church way back in 1866. I looked over the list, and sure enough, the surname was there. The list is dated December 8, 1866. So I wrote back to her and told her that I might be able to move her genealogy back another generation. That might be the name of her great-grandfather. And I told her that he had contributed to the purchase of the church. I like helping people out with inquiries about genealogy because I like myself. I've done some research about my ancestors myself. Even though they're really rather common people, they never were very heroic. I'm not descended from any English kings, legitimately or illegitimately. All my ancestors were leaders, at least as far as I know. But whenever we look back, and even though they're very common people, they had some important events in their lives. I found research that said one of my mother's ancestors was in the Civil War. He was wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. When I went to the battlefield, I knew enough about his regiment and where they were placed in the battlefield that I could go and walk the ground where he had fought. It gave that history a special meaning to me. I had a special connection with him as I would feel a little bit of the terror that he may have felt of fighting there on the battlefield and then laying there wounded for over a day. Whenever we read about history, we have a special connection to it. It means a lot more to us. We place ourselves in those events. We can maybe appreciate that history a little bit better if we realize the connection we have to it. That's what the readings are all about tonight. Tonight, in the first reading from the book of Exodus, we heard how the Israelite people were brought out of their slavery in Egypt. How God started them on the Exodus for 40 years, and how they had been able to celebrate that escape from Egypt because they followed the dictates, because they followed the commands of God. They had their homes marked by the blood of the Lamb, so they were able to escape his plague against all of Egypt. They were able to escape Pharaoh's clutches and go out and form the people of Israel. And today we hear how they were instructed to memorialize that every year on a particular date. They were to continue to celebrate that Passover so that they could remember that historic event. Even though they may have been generations separated from the Israelites who escaped Egypt, they would remember. They would go through that same remembering of how God was faithful to their ancestors, how God was faithful to them. And Paul tells the Corinthians the same thing. He tells them how Jesus at the Last Supper instituted the Eucharist, which we celebrate tonight. How he instituted that at the Passover, making a new covenant with the people, a new relationship with God, lost a relationship that we celebrate tonight. And Paul tells us that Jesus himself said, "Do this in memory of me." And that's what we do every time we celebrate the Eucharist. Every time we come together as the community of Christ, the body of the church, and celebrate the Eucharist, we remember that sacrifice. We remember that covenant. We remember how Jesus lived his life. And today in the Gospel, John doesn't tell us at all about the institution of the Eucharist. He's the only Gospel that doesn't. He gives us a few other details, though. He reminds us how Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, how he did that great act of service. In the Middle East of his day, that job was related to his work of a slave or of a servant. It was that person that did that very job of washing the feet. And he reminds us today that we're called to be people of service. We're called to be people who are people of mercy, forgiveness. We practice Jesus' arts of healing in our own world today. Every time we come to receive the Eucharist, once again, the covenant is renewed in us, and we're called to imitate Christ once again, imitate Christ in our daily lives. As I said at the beginning of Mass, this celebration tonight doesn't end here. We won't end it tonight. Unlike most Masses, I won't give you a final blessing and send you on your way. No, we'll quietly take the Eucharist from the church, take the presence of Christ from this church over to the hall to repose for adoration throughout this evening. And then tomorrow, we'll come in and celebrate. We'll begin once again in silence. We'll begin as if we're in the middle of things as we celebrate the Good Friday liturgy. We'll leave in quiet too, because it's not done yet. No, this liturgy that we began tonight continues on and through Saturday until we come to the Easter Vigil on Saturday evening. As we come together to hear about God's actions in our history, to once again celebrate the gift of life, which is Christ and the resurrection. It's only then that this Mass will finally come to an end. And so it's a reminder to us that we need to be people who bring the presence of Christ into our world. That's what our call is. That's what we celebrate as a community tonight. That's what we're called to remember. Remember, not as an act of history, but as something that's going on right now. It's going on right in our own lives today. That we are called to, as the disciples of Jesus Christ, bring that real presence, bring Christ, make him alive in our everyday world today. Today, as we begin this sacred ceremony, may we ask God to help us to be the presence of Christ, to bring his grace into our world, to be servants of our brothers and sisters in need. May we tonight imitate Christ, not just today, but every day of our lives.